If you think food only disappears when shelves are empty, you are looking too late. Over the past 90 days, I have been tracking 12 familiar foods in American supermarkets. They are still there, but they are more expensive, smaller, and discounted less often. Global olive oil production fell from 3.42 million metric tons to 2.41 million metric tons in just 2 years. The number of dairy farms in the United States declined by nearly 63% over 2 decades. The U.S. cattle herd at the beginning of 2026 stood at only about 86.2 million head, and 70 to 85% of the seafood Americans eat depends on imports. These are not 12 random foods. These are 12 signals that the food system is being stretched before many people even realize it. 12. Butter. Every day in supermarkets across the United States, someone picks up a package of butter, looks at the price, then hesitates for a few seconds before putting it into the cart. It may not seem important, but just a few years ago, that moment barely existed. Butter was simply butter. It was on morning toast, in mashed potatoes, in holiday cookies, and in family meals that people had cooked for generations. It was one of the most ordinary foods in the American kitchen. But after tracking prices, supply, and the dairy industry for 90 days, I realized that butter does not disappear by leaving the shelf. It disappears in a much more subtle way. It is still there, still the familiar brand, still the same package of butter you have bought for years. But it costs more, goes on sale less often, and increasingly makes people stop and think before buying it. The biggest reason is not the package of butter itself. It is the entire dairy system behind it. According to the USDA Economic Research Service, the number of licensed dairy farms in the United States declined from about 66,825 farms in 2004 to only about 24,811 farms in 2024. That is a decline of nearly 63% in just 2 decades. What is shocking is that national milk production did not decline at the same rate. Instead, fewer and fewer farms are producing more and more milk. America is not running out of milk. The problem is that fewer farms are carrying the entire system. And when a large system stands on fewer supports, even a small shock can change supermarket prices. That means the dairy industry is becoming more concentrated than ever before. And as a system becomes more concentrated, it also becomes more vulnerable to disruptions. All it takes is higher feed costs. All it takes is higher fuel costs. All it takes is more expensive refrigeration or a labor shortage during a certain period. The pressure quickly moves down to final products like butter, but that is only one part of the story. Unlike rice, beans, or flour, butter depends on an almost continuous cold chain. From the moment milk leaves the farm, passes through the processing plant, refrigerated trucks, distribution warehouses, and finally the supermarket, every link needs electricity, fuel, equipment, and labor. The more links a food needs to maintain its normal state, the more easily it reacts to cost changes. And that is exactly what is happening. Then comes the seasonal factor. As fall and winter approach, demand for butter usually rises sharply. This is the season of baked goods, cookies, mashed potatoes, cream soups, and family meals tied to a feeling of warmth. Right when demand rises the most, the system behind butter is also under pressure from production and transportation costs. That is why I am watching butter very closely. Not because I think butter will disappear from shelves tomorrow, but because butter is a signal. When a food that used to feel too ordinary starts making people think twice, that is often a sign that a larger change is happening behind the scenes. For families living on a fixed budget, that is no longer a small matter. A more expensive package of butter does not just raise the grocery bill, it changes how people bake, cook, and hold on to a feeling of warmth in the kitchen. Butter does not need to disappear from shelves to change the way we cook. It only needs to become expensive enough to make you look at the price tag one more time before putting it in the cart. And if a familiar food like butter has started sending that kind of signal, the next item on the list is even more worth watching. Because it is under pressure from drought, extreme heat, and failed harvests across the Atlantic. The last time you bought butter, what surprised you more? The higher price, or the fact that you had to think before buying something that once felt too ordinary to consider? 11th, olive oil. Some foods disappear by leaving the shelves, but some foods disappear in a quieter way. Still sitting there, still with the same familiar label, but priced higher, discounted less often. And each time you use it, you start pouring a little more slowly. Olive oil belongs to that group. During 90 days of tracking, what I realized is that a bottle of olive oil on the shelf is not just oil. It is weather, soil, harvests, transportation, and the American kitchen's dependence on olive groves across the Atlantic. The biggest reason is climate. In recent years, the world's largest olive oil producing regions, especially the Mediterranean, have been under pressure from prolonged drought and extreme temperatures. A study published in 2025 showed that global olive oil production fell from about 3.42 million metric tons in the 2021 to 2022 crop year to 2.57 million metric tons the following year, then continued down to about 2.41 million metric tons in the 2023 to 2024 crop year. That is not a small fluctuation. That is a decline of more than 1 million metric tons in just 2 years. Imagine a lake being drained layer by layer. At first, everything still looks normal, but at some point, you start seeing the bottom. The olive oil market is sending the same kind of signal. The problem is not that the world has run out of olive oil. The problem is that good quality olive oil is becoming harder to keep at the comfortable price level people were used to before. For families trying to keep grocery bills stable, that is no longer something happening far away in Europe. It shows up right in the kitchen. Salad gets a little less oil, a slice of toast loses a bit of that familiar richness. And the bottle is used more carefully because shoppers know that the next time they return to the supermarket, the price may have changed. What makes the problem harder is that olive trees are not like short-season crops. If tomatoes have a bad season, they can be replanted fairly quickly. But with olives, time is measured in years. A young tree needs many years to mature and produce stable yields. When production drops sharply, there is no button to press to restore supply in the next crop year. And when olive oil becomes expensive, consumers switch to avocado oil, canola oil, or other vegetable oils. But the pressure does not disappear. It only moves to the shelf next to it. A more expensive bottle of olive oil does not only speak about the price of oil. It says that drought in Spain, heat across the Mediterranean, and failed harvests half a world away are quietly walking straight into your kitchen. And the next food is even quieter. The small spice jars that many people only realize have become more expensive when it is already too late. 10 spices. There is one kind of price increase in the supermarket that is very frustrating. It does not shout for your attention. It just quietly sits inside the smallest items. Spices are the clearest example. You do not buy pepper, cinnamon, turmeric, paprika, or vanilla every week. So when prices rise, you often do not notice right away. A small jar goes up by a few dozen cents. A bottle of vanilla gets smaller. A seasoning packet stays the same price but weighs less than before. Each individual change seems insignificant, until the day you stand in front of the spice shelf and realize one small jar suddenly costs as if it is paying rent. The strongest reason is dependence on a small number of countries. Many spices in the American kitchen do not come from nearby. Black pepper depends heavily on Vietnam, Brazil, and India. Vanilla is closely tied to Madagascar. Cinnamon is famous from Sri Lanka. Turmeric depends largely on India. That means just drought, flooding, crop disease, labor shortages, or higher transportation costs in a few major producing regions can change prices in American supermarkets. Shoppers only see a jar of pepper on the shelf, but behind it are weather, harvests, labor, seaports, and thousands of miles of transportation. The second reason is that spices require many post-harvest steps. They have to be sun-dried, dried, ground, inspected, packaged, and transported. 1 ounce of spice looks very small, but it contains an entire chain of costs behind it. The third reason is that cold weather increases demand. Soup, stew, chili, apple pie, cookies, holiday casseroles, all of them need spices to have a warm and comforting flavor. When many families shift toward cooking cheaper meals, spices become even more important because they turn rice, beans, potatoes, or pasta into a meal that feels more complete. When spices become more expensive, what disappears is not just a small jar on the shelf. What disappears is the ability to make cheap food still taste good. And the next item on the list is even more worth watching because it does not just bring flavor. It brings protein, something many American families need more than ever. If you could keep only one spice in your kitchen for an entire year, which one would you choose? Black pepper, garlic powder, cinnamon, paprika, or something else? 9. Canned seafood. If spices change quietly in the kitchen, canned seafood changes in a different way. It makes you think everything is still fine. A can of tuna, a can of sardines, a can of salmon. Open it and eat, no cooking required. Long shelf life, convenient for lunch, a quick dinner, or days when you do not want to turn on the stove. Because of that, many people view canned seafood as one of the most reliable sources of protein. But after 90 days of tracking, I started noticing small signs. Fewer choices, a few brands disappearing, some cans getting smaller, higher prices, and quality not always matching what it used to be. The biggest reason is that the United States depends heavily on imported seafood. NOAA reports that about 70 to 85% of seafood consumed in the United States is connected to imports. That is an enormous number. It means a can of fish on the shelf does not depend only on whether fish are available. It depends on fishing vessels, fuel, seaports, processing plants, containers, cold storage, labor, and international trade. When one link in that chain is stretched, the small can in your kitchen cabinet feels the effect too. The second reason is that canned seafood does not only require fish. It requires metal cans, lids, oil, brine, labels, production lines, and packaging facilities. If metal, energy, or labor costs rise, canned fish comes under pressure, even if the fish supply itself has not changed. The third reason lies in the ocean. Water temperatures, El Niño, fish migration patterns, and fishing seasons can all change supply before shoppers see any obvious signs in the supermarket. What is worth noting is that canned seafood used to be an economical and dependable source of protein. But when a small can of fish starts getting more expensive, it is not just a story about a quick lunch. It is saying that the ocean, the factories, and the transportation network behind it are all under strain. And when a food known for stability starts changing, that is exactly when we should pay attention. 8. Heavy cream and cream cheese. There are foods that do not appear every day in the kitchen, But when you need them, you almost cannot fully replace them. Heavy cream and cream cheese are that kind of food. You can go grocery shopping for weeks without paying attention to them. But when you want to make cheesecake, spread something on a bagel, cook a pot of cream soup, make mashed potatoes richer, or prepare dessert for a holiday, you suddenly realize what used to be a side item is now starting to make the bill heavier. What makes heavy cream and cream cheese special is not that they are daily essentials. It is that they are tied to family moments, cold season dinners, holiday baking, comfort food when people want the kitchen to feel a little warmer. And because they are not bought often, many people do not notice the price has changed until the exact moment they need them. The biggest pressure comes from seasonal demand and the small luxury level of food. When fall and winter arrive, bakeries, restaurants, coffee chains, and families all need more heavy cream, cream cheese, whipped topping, frosting, and dessert bases. The same group of ingredients gets pulled in many directions at once. When production costs rise, high-fat foods that require careful storage like these often rise in price very clearly. What is worth saying is that this is not the kind of item that makes people panic when it becomes expensive. Nobody stands in front of the cream cheese shelf and thinks, "The crisis is here." But they will skip the cheesecake. They will choose a cheaper recipe. They will make soup thinner, less rich, less satisfying. And that is the quiet disappearance. Not disappearing from the shelf, but disappearing from the foods that make an ordinary meal feel more special. 7. Fresh garlic. Try a small experiment. Over the next week, cook all your familiar meals without using garlic. No garlic for pasta sauce, no garlic for stir-fries, no garlic for grilled meat, no garlic for soup or marinades. Very quickly, you will realize one thing. What you miss is not the garlic bulb. What you miss is the flavor. That is exactly what makes garlic one of the most powerful ingredients in the kitchen. It is rarely the main star of a dish. It does not sit in the middle of the plate like a steak or salmon, but it appears in the background of almost everything. Like a background musician whose existence you only notice when they suddenly disappear. The strongest push comes from global dependence. China currently accounts for about 73% of global garlic production. That number is too large to ignore. It means that a very large part of the global garlic supply is tied to the production conditions, labor costs, transportation, and trade of a single country. When there is disruption there, the impact can spread much farther than many people think. But the garlic bulb is only the tip of the iceberg. Garlic appears in garlic powder, jarred minced garlic, pre-mixed seasonings, sauces, frozen foods, and a whole range of processed products. When garlic prices rise, the impact often spreads across many shelves at once. Shoppers may not notice it immediately, but they start seeing familiar products become more expensive little by little. Then there is another reality. Garlic cannot be created in a few weeks to make up for a shortage. It takes time to grow, harvest, dry, store, and transport. Its supply chain is much slower than consumers often imagine. One garlic bulb looks very small. But take it out of the kitchen for a month, and you will quickly see the gap it leaves behind. That is why garlic is not just a vegetable. It is the flavor foundation of countless everyday meals. And when the foundation starts shaking, the changes often spread much farther than its actual size. 6. Eggs. There was a time when eggs were something people put in the cart, almost without looking at the price. They were like bread or milk, too familiar to think about. But then, after just one period of disruption, millions of Americans began standing in front of the egg section longer than usual. Not because they no longer needed eggs, but because a carton of eggs suddenly became expensive enough to make people change their meal plans. The most dangerous thing about eggs is the speed of volatility. Beef usually rises slowly. Cheese often creeps up gradually. But eggs can change price very quickly when avian flu appears. When an outbreak happens at a large farm, millions of birds can be culled to prevent the spread. The severity was big enough that the USDA once announced a $1 billion plan to control avian flu and reduce pressure on egg prices. That is not a response to a small problem. What makes eggs even more worth watching is that they are not only part of breakfast. Eggs are in bread, baked goods, mayonnaise, pasta, frozen foods, sauces, and many prepared foods. When egg prices rise, the impact does not stop at one carton in the refrigerator. It spreads to bakeries, restaurants, and many other shelves in the supermarket. On top of that, egg production is now more concentrated than before. When a few major regions or facilities run into problems, the market reacts almost immediately. Egg prices may stabilize again for a period, but the lesson remains. Eggs do not disappear because Americans eat more breakfast. They disappear when an overly concentrated system faces a shock that consumers only see at the very end, on the price tag. 5. Cheese is not always the main item on the table, but it is what makes a cheap meal feel less like eating just to get through the day. A baked potato can fill you up, but add cheddar and it becomes dinner. A plate of pasta can fill your stomach, but add mozzarella and it feels warmer. A sandwich slice can be very ordinary, but just add one slice of cheese and it instantly feels more like a proper meal. That is why cheese is more dangerous than many people think. When it rises in price, people do not panic right away like they do with eggs or beef. They just quietly buy less. Less cheddar on potatoes, less Parmesan in pasta, less mozzarella on homemade pizza, and little by little, family meals lose that layer of richness, saltiness, melt, and feeling of fullness. The biggest pressure on cheese is that it does not only serve shoppers in supermarkets. It is also pulled heavily by pizza chains, fast food, restaurants, frozen meals, sandwich shops, and processed foods. The same milk supply has to go into millions of pizzas, burgers, burritos, snacks, ready meals, and boxes of mac and cheese. Family shoppers are not competing with just a few people standing at the same counter. They are competing with an entire giant food industry. And unlike fresh milk, cheese needs time, cold storage, packaging, transportation, and sometimes aging. Each of those steps adds cost. When refrigeration, labor, fuel, and packaging rise, cheese prices do not need to explode right away. They just need to creep up steadily until a bag of shredded cheese no longer feels as cheap as before. The real punch is here. When cheese becomes expensive, poorer people do not just lose an ingredient. They lose one of the cheapest ways to turn starch into comfort food. Without cheese, many foods are still edible, but they are less joyful, less filling, and feel less like a meal made with care. Cheese does not disappear from the shelves. It disappears first from budget dinners, from homemade pizza, from weekend pasta, and from the feeling that just a little topping can make the whole family feel warmer. In your opinion, what is more worrying? That cheese is getting more expensive, or that the foods that once helped the whole family have a good dinner are slowly becoming something people have to think twice about before buying? 4. Ground beef. Nearly $7 for a pound of ground beef. Just a few years ago, that number was enough to surprise many people. Today, it is gradually becoming the new normal. And that is what makes ground beef one of the most worth-watching foods on this list. Because this is not a premium meat for special occasions. This is the protein that was once seen as the budget choice for millions of American families. Weekend burgers. Taco Tuesday. A pot of chili for a cold day. Spaghetti with meat sauce for a quick dinner. Many familiar meals begin with a package of ground beef. But what is happening behind the meat counter is not simply a story about prices. It is a story about supply. According to the USDA, the total number of cattle and calves in the United States at the beginning of 2026 was only about 86.2 million head. The beef cow herd continued to decline, while the number of calves born also fell further. These numbers may sound distant, but what they mean is very simple. There are fewer cattle to become beef in the future. What makes the situation harder is that years of drought have weakened pastures, while feed costs have remained high. When profit margins get squeezed, many ranchers choose to reduce their herds instead of expanding them. And this is the biggest difference between cattle and many other livestock animals. You cannot increase beef supply in just a few months. From breeding to the time the animal is large enough to enter the market is a process that takes years. The final result shows up on the price label. According to Fred/BLS data, the average price of ground beef approached $6.90 per pound in 2026. For many families, this is no longer the cheap protein it used to be. The concern is not that beef disappears from supermarkets. The concern is that more and more families begin walking past the meat counter because it no longer fits their budget the way it once did. Ground beef does not disappear from supermarkets. It disappears from budget meals first. 3. Fresh seafood. The fresh seafood counter is one of the places that creates the strongest feeling of reassurance in the supermarket. Fish sits on white ice. Shrimp is neatly arranged under cold lighting. Labels saying fresh, wild-caught, previously frozen, or Atlantic salmon make everything look stable. But that clean appearance hides an uncomfortable truth. Fresh seafood is one of the foods with the least room for error. Unlike canned fish, fresh seafood does not have much buffer. A can of fish can sit in the pantry for months. But a piece of fresh fish is racing against time from the moment it leaves the boat, fish farm, processing plant, or cold storage facility. It needs ice, electricity, refrigerated containers, refrigerated trucks, fast handling labor, and delivery schedules that can barely afford delays. Just one delayed shipment, one clogged port, one fuel price spike, or higher refrigeration costs can change prices at the seafood counter very quickly. What is concerning is that shoppers usually see seafood at the very end, after everything has been made to look appealing. They do not see offshore weather. They do not see boats staying docked because fuel is expensive. They do not see distributors having to discard product because shelf life is too short. They do not see restaurants, hotels, and supermarkets all competing for the best shipments. By the time shoppers see it, all that pressure has been compressed into one small number on the price tag. And the ocean does not operate on the supermarket's sale schedule. Changing ocean temperatures, weak fishing seasons, major storms, El Niño, disease in farmed seafood, or new import regulations can all shift supply before consumers realize it. With fresh seafood, the issue is not only whether fish is available. The issue is whether the right type of fish, the right size, the right quality, at the right time, arrives before it loses value. Fresh seafood looks like it is sitting still on ice, but in reality, its price is racing against time, fuel, weather, and the ocean behind it. 2. Garlic powder. If I place a jar of garlic powder next to a tray of beef, a carton of eggs, and a bag of shrimp, almost everyone will think it is the least important item on the table. And that is exactly what makes garlic powder dangerous. It is small. It is cheap. It is easy to overlook. But it appears in more places than most people imagine. Garlic powder is not only on the spice rack. It appears in seasoning mixes, soup mixes, sauces, marinades, snacks, frozen foods, processed meats, and hundreds of other food products. In other words, when garlic powder changes, many other things change with it. The biggest pressure still begins with the raw ingredient. China currently accounts for about 73% of global garlic production. That means a very large part of the world's garlic supply depends on the weather, production costs, labor, and transportation of a single country. A jar of garlic powder on the shelf does not appear there by itself. It starts with garlic bulbs in the field, then goes through drying, fine grinding, packaging, and transportation across many different layers of cost. The problem also lies in energy. Creating garlic powder requires industrial drying systems, grinders, processing lines, and packaging. When electricity, fuel, or production costs rise, processed products like garlic powder often feel the pressure very quickly. Then comes the phenomenon consumers are becoming increasingly familiar with: shrinkflation. The jar is still there, the packaging colors still look the same, but the weight goes down. The price creeps up, or the quality changes quietly. Not big enough to get attention in one shopping trip, but enough to make a difference after many months. A jar of garlic powder does not make anyone panic. But when even such a small ingredient starts becoming more expensive, it is a sign that the entire cheap flavor layer of the kitchen is being stretched. And that leads us to the final spot on the list. 1. Affordable protein. The most important thing after everything we have just seen is not butter, not eggs, not beef, not seafood. It is something bigger than all of those foods: the gradual disappearance of affordable protein. For decades, American families always had a backup choice. If beef became expensive, they switched to eggs. If eggs rose in price, they bought canned fish. If seafood became more expensive, they chose cheese or another protein source. The system always had an escape route, always had an alternative. But what is happening now is that many protein sources are under pressure at the same time. The U.S. cattle herd is at its lowest level in many years. Ground beef has moved close to $6.90 per pound. The egg industry still faces the risk of avian flu. Seafood depends heavily on imports and international transportation. The dairy industry has to carry increasingly high costs for refrigeration, labor, and transportation. This is not a single problem. This is many different systems being stretched at the same time. What makes this story even more worth thinking about is the speed of recovery. A cattle herd cannot be rebuilt in a few months. An egg farm cannot instantly return to normal after disease. A weak fishing season cannot be fixed with one administrative decision. Nature and time do not operate on the market's schedule. Meanwhile, family shoppers are not only competing with one another, they are also competing with restaurants, fast food chains, the processed food industry, and global demand. The same protein supply has to serve more people, more businesses, and more systems. Perhaps what is disappearing is not a package of beef, a carton of eggs, or a can of fish. What is disappearing is the old feeling that many people once took for granted. The feeling that you could walk into a supermarket anytime, buy a good protein source at a reasonable price, then go home without thinking too much about the bill. And if there is one thing these 90 days of observation show, it is that change often does not begin with empty shelves. It begins with items that are still there. But fewer and fewer people feel comfortable putting them in the cart. After all, the most important thing to notice about these 12 foods is not that they are disappearing completely. Most of them are still on the shelves. The problem is that they are changing in a much quieter way. More expensive, discounted less often, and more dependent on systems that are more fragile than before. From drought in Europe, Avian flu on farms, changes in the ocean, to energy and transportation costs. All of it is gradually showing up in every family's grocery bill. Perhaps the biggest lesson is not fear or rushing to stockpile. It is understanding that the most familiar foods are often the foods most easily taken for granted. What about you? On this list, which item surprised you the most? And which food have you noticed quietly becoming more expensive or harder to buy where you live? Share it in the comments. I would really like to hear your real experience.